The Spanish American frontier was a defining aspect of the 16th century. But before we can explain the complexities of the frontier, we have to understand why Spain decided to come to the Americas in the first place. Little was known about the American continent in the late 15th century, and Spain didn't have much to go off of, and therefore not much of a reason to invest in the land. This fact didn't change, but in 1492 the Spanish royals, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, funded a voyage to Asia, led by none other than Christopher Columbus. They did this under the guise that Columbus would bring back riches and convert the natives of the land to Christianity. So the Spanish crew set off west to eventually arrive at what they thought was the Indies, but turned out to be what we call now the Bahamas. This land was rich in arable soil and had great potential for wealth and the growth of a colony. After Columbus and his crew discovered this, they later reported it to the same Spanish royals that had sent them. Little did these sailors know that they had unintentionally opened the Spanish American frontier.
Many things could characterize the Spanish American frontier, but there was a persistent aspect of the frontier that never stopped playing a part until the very end. This was a relationship between the Spaniards and the natives, which is an us versus them relationship. And in the relationship rested two different goals, a different one for each side. The Spanish colonists wanted to convert the natives to Spanish Christianity while also making a profit for Spain. Not all of the colonists valued both of these wants, but they were still valued generally, nonetheless. Some of the native peoples wanted to defend their homeland from the Spanish, while others strived to adapt to the immense change in social structure that the Spanish had brought with them. The first system of governance that the Spaniards had used to rule over the natives was called the Encomienda System. The Encomienda System was one in which the Spanish colonizers gave themselves the right to demand labor and tribute from the natives assigned to them regionally back in Spain. This in turn made every colonial man given this power a sort of administrational position as a leader of a native group. As you can probably imagine, the people did not actually care about the natives at all. And the native workers were unfortunately harshly exploited, and the high death rates due to illnesses like smallpox only decreased the labor supply. And this led to an increase in workload on each individual native. This means that in the us-them frontier, us, the Spanish conquistadors, exploited and used the native population because they did not see them as part of their group. They saw them as the other people. To showcase this, here's a letter from a Spanish American colonist to the Spanish royals detailing the realities of the Encomienda system.
Dearest brother, it has been quite an abysmal month at my sugarcane plantation. I have lost 8 of my 22 slaves to another smallpox outbreak, and therefore the efficiency of my plantation has been much lower than normal. I fear I may lag behind the competitors in the vicinity who have not been handed this unfortunate loss of labor. The only explanation is that this is God's punishment for my paltry efforts in spreading His word to the slaves under my supervision. Try as I might to help them understand the true God, they endure in following the path of the devil by practicing their strange and barbaric beliefs. I reach out to you, brother, in this time of need, to ask of you a favor, and I hope you will help me in this endeavor. Because of these unfortunate circumstances, I am low on funds, and it would be an enormous help if you could finance the import of 5 new slaves to the plantation. You will be compensated within the year after this purchase, and I will be greatly appreciative of your assistance. I wish you a health, and I await your reply. Sincerely, Fernando Copan.
The exploitation of the native population started the building of tension that would only increase as time went on. It did actually create the need for a new system because over the years, the Spanish and the natives started to mix together. The new social system that came out of this was the Hacienda. Unlike the Encomienda system, the Hacienda was separate from the native economy, while the Encomienda had used the indigenous American structure. The Hacienda had created its own. In the simplest of terms, the Hacienda was a hierarchy, one organized in this fashion. The Peninsulares, who were Spaniards that were born in Spain, were at the top. Remember, it is important to note that they have pure Spanish blood. Then, following the Peninsulares are the Creoles, who were the children of people born in Spain. The Mestizos followed them, and these are the children of a Spanish parent and a native parent. And following that is the Native Americans who were who only had native blood. They did not have any Spanish heritage. And Following that were the enslaved peoples. Most of these people were from Africa. Well, we won't be getting into slavery since that is a whole nother topic. We must note that the natives were once again given less privileges than the Spanish, as you can see with the placement in the hierarchy of the mestizos and the Native Americans. And this built more tension between the Spanish people and the native people on the frontier. The Encomienda and Hacienda systems were very important in the Spanish pioneering of America, but truthfully, they were a means to an end, one of these ends being the Christianization of the indigenous peoples. Aside from bringing glory to Spain and bringing wealth to Spain, converting the native population to Christianity was the main goal of many of the Spanish colonists that arrived in the New World. This goal was to be achieved by the establishing of missions all across the American continent. For a bit of context on what the American continent was seen to be at this time, here's the map drawn by Diego Gutierrez in the mid-1500s. In it, you can see a fairly accurate portrayal of South America, while the North American portion focuses on central and modern-day Florida. These local missions all across the landmass were led by Franciscan missionaries sent directly from Spain, whose purpose was to convert and civilize the Native Americans. Civilize mostly meaning the assimilation of the Native Americans into Spanish culture. This was mostly done to get the natives to accept the harsh conditions that both the Encomienda and Hacienda systems promised. Missions went about doing this in many different ways, but at the start of the colonization of the frontier, the missionaries forced total conversions of all the native people, making them totally abandon all their native traditions or face harsh consequences. This, of course, did not go over well with many of the indigenous tribes with their own strong native traditions, increasing the ever-growing cultural strain between the indigenous peoples and the Spaniards, thus strengthening the us-them frontier. Little by little, some people partially assimilated into the Spanish culture. This can be seen in the differences in the clothing of Native Americans who held on to their original culture versus those who held on less tightly. Although Spain placed native conversion high on their list of priorities, other goals, such as bringing glory and power to Spain, were still incredibly important. The New World had large gold and silver deposits, which could make Spain very, very rich, as most intercontinental trade back in these times was performed using either gold or silver since they had inherent value. An abundance of gold or silver for Spain would mean significant leverage in trade all across Europe and even reaching Southeast Asia. With the gold and the silver that they could bring in, they could grow in power immensely. However, the Spanish needed a large population to be able to mine the gold and silver for them. To them, it was most convenient to use the native population to do their work. This need for resources is one of the biggest reasons that the previously mentioned social hierarchies were created in the first place. Thus, again, playing into the us-them narrative. Us, people who had Spanish blood, did not mine for gold and silver for Spain. The indigenous peoples, them, did mine gold and silver for Spain. Like I've said throughout the video, the us-them frontier brought a lot of heightened tension and division between the Spaniards and the natives. The Pueblo Revolt of 1680 and Juanilo's Revolt show this and are the culmination of the immense cultural and physical pressure put on the backs of the many Native American tribes of the area. Juanilo's Revolt happened in response to the harsh treatment of indigenous tribesmen by Spanish missions, resulting in the death of 5 Franciscan friars and the burning of many missions at the hands of the Gual Indians. This had large ramifications for missions everywhere once the news got out, most missions becoming more tolerant than they previously were. To show the reaction of some of the mission leaders in many other areas, here's an interview with one friar after the news reached him.
Good evening. I'm here with Friar Clarence, and today we'll be discussing the events that happened last night. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Can you elaborate on what exactly happened last night?
Oh, what happened last night? It was terrible. Horrible. The murders of 5 Franciscan friars. It hurts my heart so much to have that happen.
What started this? According to one of my sources, one of the friars rebuked Juanilo, a young Indian from Kalamata, for polygamy. Polygamy is considered a sin in Christianity. So, is this story true?
I do not know if it's true, unfortunately. I do not know that much about that friar and what he said. But I do know Juanillo, he came in and he destroyed friaries in the area, and destroyed all the missionaries too. It was a tragedy, and the deaths of those 5 innocent friars just hurts my heart.
How are you and the other friars planning to deal with the situation?
We wish to continue and strike forth with our position, but we just can't, not in good faith. It's too risky here. We can't risk our lives and those of our communities for this. So unfortunately, there's nothing we can do.
Alright, thank you for interviewing today.
Thank you so much for listening.
This painting here is titled The Conquest of Tenochtitlan, and it perfectly depicts the us-them frontier that we've been discussing throughout the video. We can see that the Spanish have significantly more sophisticated weapons, such as swords, and they have horses as well as armor. We can also see that their shields appear to be made out of metal, whereas the shields for the indigenous people, or the Aztecs, appears to be made out of wood. The indigenous people, or the Aztecs, also don't have armor like the Spanish, and their weapons consisted of bows and arrows. The Spanish-American frontier was not without its complications. In fact, it is defined by these complications, most prominently the us-them division between the Spaniards and the natives. Ultimately, the expedition of the Spanish conquistadors resulted in a significantly different America than that it had preceded, leaving a mark of culture, religion, and resentment.